This is the story that will affect each one of us. Anti-poverty body Oxfam has warned of a widening inequality gap that's just days ahead of the Davos Economic Summit in Switzerland. The Oxfam report says by next year, if the trends continue, 1% of the world's population will own more wealth than all the rest put together. That's 99%. Well, joining us in our Delhi studios, the CEO of Oxfam India, Nisha Agrawal. Thanks so much for joining us, Ms. Agrawal. Just last year, Oxfam had a similar kind of report where you said 85 of the richest people had the same amount of wealth that the poorest 50% have. That's 3.5 billion versus 85. These are even more stunning numbers.
Yes. So we are launching this report again, like last year at the time of Davos, where the 1% gather. And you know, it's the World Economic Forum itself, which we are co-chairing this year,
Sure.
that has highlighted rising inequality as one of the biggest risks facing all of us on the whole planet. And what they're saying is that not only does it affect growth, which we all care about because it generates job, tax revenues, etc., but it makes countries very unstable. Society falls apart, there's crime, there's violence, there's capture of policies. So it's not a good thing that today 7 out of 10% of the people in the world are living in countries where inequality is rising. So, and very, very sharply, where we say that currently that top 1% owns 48% of the wealth, and then in a couple of years they're going to own more than all the rest of us put together, the remaining 99%.
Just picking up from that last point that you were making, now one of the narratives for most governments and politicians, especially here in India, and most politicians who want to be in government, is growth, as you were pointing out.
Yes.
But then with inequality and such sharpening or widening inequality, both growth and governance will not fail, but they won't really work, will they?
And that is the message of our report, that it's not inevitable, that, you know, we need certain kinds of policies that will promote both inclusive growth and also better governance. We say that, you know, when we say we want high growth, which we are seeing now, all of industry rally around this new government, Modi's government.
Sure.
All we would say is whose growth? Is it of this top 1% or is it the bottom 20 and 30%? So are there policies, are we putting in place policies that will stimulate the growth of agriculture? That's where poor people are. Sector is in crisis. Are we putting in place policies that will stimulate the growth of the informal sector economy? Or are we just going to continue with this trickle-down economics, which has not shown to work anywhere in the world, that first the top 1% have to get even richer and then we all have to wait while those benefits hopefully trickle down, which never really happens.
These policies that you are talking about now, President Obama is due to give his State of the Union address on Tuesday, where he's expected to announce a lot of redistributive tax policies. Is that one of the 7 points in the plan that you want governments to pursue? What would you be looking for, say, in our budget?
In our budget, we would like to see 3 things. One, you know, we are collecting very little taxes at the moment, and that burden is on a few small people. So really collecting, our taxes are less than even other developing countries. Like we compare ourselves to the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Indonesia. We are collecting lower than any of them. And therefore we end up spending lower than any of them on, say, something like healthcare, where we spend only 0.9% of GDP on healthcare, whereas 3% is the norm.
Is there also a leakage in taxes?
There are leakages, but firstly we need to collect more. We don't have an inheritance tax. That is something we would lobby for. Yeah. We have a very, very tiny wealth tax. Yeah. When wealth is exploding in this way, we would really be looking to the government, both as a signal also that we don't want to live in such an unequal economy, to have taxes that tax the rich, but also broaden the base. Secondly, we would be looking for more spending on health and education. We want every universal basic healthcare and basic education. The results from ASAR and other reports are terrible, that 5th grade children can't read and write, and we are going backwards. We are not getting better, we are getting worse. I mean, is that I think we are the only country in the world where we are getting worse from year to year.
Again, just clarification on the report. Now, some of the statistics that are given there show an inflection point around 2010, where the rising level of those who are not that wealthy has fallen off. Does it have to do with policies after the global recession?
You're talking about globally in the world?
Yeah.
Yes, many countries like in Latin America, they're actually bringing inequality down. So they have put in place safety nets. This was the third thing I was going to say that we want from the government. There's a lot of talk as if it's really the very basic safety nets that we have in place, like NREGA, like the new food security law, as if this is what is busting the economy and busting the budget. But you know, there are 5 to 6% of GDP that we give away as tax breaks to the corporate sector. Is that not important to look at? Is that really achieving the goals? We've never done a study on that. And today, just this morning, we had a policy charcha in the Ministry of Finance where even the corporate sector themselves are coming and saying, just make it easier to do business. We are not looking for subsidies from you, you know. So we are giving our very precious resources to the rich rather than to the poor.
Just another question, last question on the methodology. Now, it would be, I would presume, very easy to get that figure for the 1% of the richest in terms of their wealth.
Yes.
Forbes, whether it's Credit Suisse that you've used.
Yeah.
But how do you calculate how much or estimate how much the other 99% have in terms of wealth?
Well, if you can, it's a tough one, and it's only recently that you're beginning to see data on wealth and on inequality, like in Thomas Piketty's book where he's put this together, because this data is not very easily available, but you do get some estimates from tax records in most places. And so for India to get better and better records, we need to really start capturing that. And if we don't have a proper wealth tax, if we don't have an inheritance tax, we'll actually never know how wealthy the Indian rich are.
And how poor
the other half is.
Nisha Agrawal, the CEO of Oxfam India, thank you so much for coming and sharing your report days before Davos.
Thank you so much.